Welcome back, everybody. If we could all be seated. It's great to hear the level of discussion taking place in the room, both inside and outside around the auditorium. Networking and meeting your colleagues is at least 50% of what the Leaders Summit is about, so I'm pleased that everybody's enjoying each other's company. Another aspect that I need to bring everybody's attention to are our sponsors. If we don't have their support, we can't create events like this with premier catering, facilities, services and what have you. So I do ask you that you do take time and go and see our sponsors. If they've supported us, it means that they are successful businesses, which means that they are also delivering services for a large number of clients. We often say within DCM that it appears to us that the suppliers have more knowledge and wisdom about certain areas of aged care or retirement living than the actual operators, and that's obvious because they see many different suppliers and operators at different levels and see how they operate. I'd also like just to mention, if you're wondering why we have this fine furniture on the auditorium, on the podium, is because Crown Furniture every year provide us with their furniture, a fine Australian company. All the manufacturing's done here in just about 30 kilometres from here. Interesting point about the war with Ukraine, they were one of the first companies to be hit because they get a lot of the timber for their furniture, which has to be light but extremely strong and sturdy, and much of it comes from the Ukraine. So they lost supply for about 6 months, but they still managed to deliver for the sector. So our first speaker after morning tea is Tracey Burton. Tracey is the Executive Director of Uniting New South Wales ACT. We're very pleased to have Tracey with us. While she's also the largest operator of aged care in the state, aged care is only one portion of her remit. She also has disability, she has homelessness, she has drug support, etc., etc., etc. But as she said, without doubt, the aged care sector is the one that requires the most of her attention from a day-to-day operations side. So she's kindly agreed to come and give us her thoughts on the aged care sector. Tracey.
Good morning. I can't tell you what a privilege it is to be in a room of leaders, and I love how Chris has called out that it's on our watch. Whatever's going to happen for the next few years is on our watch. So it is lovely to be in a room with this energy and capability and commitment to this sector. As I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands. That's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and on your behalf and my own, pay respects to their elders of the past, the present and those of the future. Uniting's very proud that we have over 350 First Nations employees across New South Wales and ACT, and we are a strong supporter of the Yes campaign. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do. Let's see this really significant and symbolic step be successful in 2023 in the referendum. So as Chris has said, Uniting is a sort of a big organisation here in New South Wales, but we're part of something even bigger. We're part of the Uniting Care Australia network. And fortunately, my numbers here line up with what Simon said. So here New South Wales ACT, which is the part of this network that I'm responsible for, is 3% of the sector for aged care. But when I stand shoulder to shoulder with my colleagues around the country, we make up just over 9% of the sector as Uniting Care Australia. So I'll just pop on to the next slide, just to very quickly sort of set the scene about what Uniting does. Seniors is by far the largest thing that we do. You can see we've got aged care residents, not 7,700 beds. That's how many residents we care for in a year. We have about 5,600 beds across 74 homes in 62 locations. For our independent living, we have 87 villages. 70 of those are registered RVs, and the others are rental villages, deregistered. They're our legacy villages. We have a large number of home care clients through CHSP and through home care packages in that number there. We operate the War Memorial Hospital here in Sydney, and you know, you wouldn't really design an organisation to do all these things, but we do these things because of our heritage. In the late 1800s, there was this incredibly generous and wealthy Presbyterian man who went to Scotland and saw this new model for looking after children whose parents could no longer afford to keep them, or orphanages, basically. So they built these beautiful new models of orphanages, which were home-like. It's called, his name was Burnside, so the Burnside legacy. And how we came to be in aged care and in early learning. We have 50 early learning services across the state. The congregations of the Uniting Church, incredibly active. They saw a need in their community, they did the fundraising, and they built the nursing homes 40 plus years ago. They built the early learning services. And then in the DNA of the Uniting Church, who is our founder, is social justice. And so when the medically supervised injecting centre needed to have a home, when Bob Carr got brave and took a big social policy step there, the church put its hand up and said, we'll do that. So off the medically supervised injecting centre, we are a loud advocate for drug law reform. We were the first enterprise in the Southern Hemisphere to have a social impact bond. So we play a lot in this space because of our heritage. So some of the big things we've been doing recently as Uniting in the last few years, in our residential aged care, we've actually adopted the household model. We haven't got it into all 74 of our homes yet, but we've got it into most. And what that means is a bit like what the Royal Commission called out in terms of small congregate living. The economies of scale wouldn't allow that to be multiple houses, but it allows us to have households of about 20 residents inside each of our homes. So that's sort of been our big move there. I'll speak a little bit more about our move with responding to regional need. In home care, we've had a technology-led change, a transformation in our home care delivery, working in partnership with Lycare actually. And so this is about getting the team as close as possible and empowering the team to sort things with the residents and the people who love them, the clients and the people who love them. So we've been doing some work on what we call the neighbourhood model. Assisted living, I'll talk a little bit more about. Affordable housing for seniors, that the legacy RVs that we have, we've increasingly turned those into rental, affordable rental. And uniting with a number of other collaborators in this room, in 2019 we heard the call from government, from providers, really the need that we couldn't have 7 peak bodies representing aged care services and all sort of having competing voices and sometimes different voices. So Uniting and a number of other providers really called on particularly the then AXA, Laser and the Guild to sort of come together and make a change. We facilitated an independent workshop in Melbourne in early days of 2020, and we all know what happened soon after that, and it led to the AACC, and then ultimately we can see ACPA forming and coming together today. And we see this as such an important thing. We have Tom there, who you could hear from as a new Chief Executive Officer, able to reset relationships, able to reset the approach. We've got to give him time to build the bench strength of his team. We've got to prioritise, but he is absolutely pivotal in working with us to actually reset the relationship we have with the government, with the community. We've lost so much trust, so we must rebuild trust, and we think we can do that much better if we're a united sector, and having ACPA there to do that is really important. So yeah, it's yet to be seen how well all of these moves that we've been making these last few years, we started the household model well before the Royal Commission, in fact in 2016, but it's, you know, it'll be interesting to see how our moves will set us up for success. So let me say, exactly 2 years ago, I was right here on this podium. The Royal Commission report had landed on the 1st of March. We were waiting for the Morrison government's response in May. And I think it's funny how you sort of think back and recall, well, what did the Royal Commission find? And the government of the day, the media of the day, wanted to find that, in fact, providers have been the ones at fault. But that's not what they found. They actually found a widespread and prolonged system of neglect. And Commissioner Briggs actually said much of the evidence we've received during our inquiry, which we have to acknowledge included some awful stories about how seniors were not looked after in this system. But she said much of the evidence has pointed to the inadequate funding available to provide high quality care. This isn't a recent problem, this is a long run problem. She talked about indexation over the last 20 years, reducing the real funding being available. So For me, the development of a sustainable funding model for aged care is in fact the unfinished business of the Royal Commission. So 2 years ago when I stood here, I, on behalf of Uniting, called for the Productivity Commission to quickly pick this work up, keep the momentum of the Royal Commission going, so that someone could really examine what are the options for long-term funding of this new ideal that's portrayed in those 148 recommendations. But that didn't happen. And so here we are 2 years later with a gap between what the standards and the ideal and the expectation of our seniors and people who love them versus what funding is available. The gap is actually wider than ever. So for me, as per the title of my talk, I think really we are at a crossroads with our financial sustainability. And if you need the evidence, well, you just got to look at the first Q1 report, and there it is, the sector on display. Providers spending $28 a day more than they're earning, huge losses, and that's the government's report. So, and really, there's nothing new in that. The report that's always been funded by the government agency, it's and Stuart Brown's commentary, it's been there, but here it is up in lights. And yes, since this point in time, ANAC funding has come in. So on the 1st of October, we all got a new level of funding. And for Uniting, what that's turned out to be, we're still evolving, it's early days, is an average of about $22 a day more than we were getting prior to that. So $22 a day uplift, that sounds good. The problem is that we've worked out in order to meet the minutes requirements and the 24 RN, in fact, it's going to cost us at least $34 a day. So this round of reforms, this is going to be another financial setback if we leave the settings as they are today. I thought you might be interested in terms of how it's looking. Uniting's a bit like the sector. Across those homes that I mentioned, we've got this huge array of low care, high care, metropolitan, small, large, regional, you name it. And what this graph shows you is that the new black line on the top, that's the new level of ANAC funding across that portfolio of homes. The blue line is what our ACFI funding was in that first quarter. And then the columns are the differences. And you can see that we've got one home there that's actually going to earn $50 a day more for under ANAC, which sounds fabulous, except in a minute I'm going to take you to the next slide, which shows you the minutes. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back if that's okay, Bronwyn. So we've got this huge array of winners and losers. Really significant disruption to what we're going to see in the P&L of every single home. It's going to be interesting when Stuart Brown published the next report, how is that going to go in that per home analysis. And so down the far end there, you can see that we have some homes that are going to earn less under ANAC. And those homes, 2 out of the 4 in the red have been invited to apply for transitional funding. The other 2 haven't. One that's about halfway up's been invited, so we're not quite sure about why that is. But we're learning and finding our way. So you can see the level of disruption and change that's coming with this very significant funding reform. The next slide shows you the minutes. And so even though our homes are very varied, from very acute dementia, acute frailty, through to low care, almost the hostel type environment, you can see in the columns the required minutes are pretty consistent right across. There's not a big range in terms of the required minutes. So to be compliant, you've got to get to the top of that green line. Now, the red line, or the Uniting coloured line that's across the top, that's our current staffing. And you can see some of our sites are already well above it. We've got one very big anomaly sticking out there, and that's our beautiful home in Canberra called eBray. This is a specialist dementia unit for people with severe behaviours. So we have traditionally received additional grant funding for that special home, and we're hoping that we will get grant funding. Otherwise, we might need to revert back and have a more traditional offering there, which would be a great shame, because I know we support a lot of families and other providers indeed with that home. So we've got this gap. The lines across the bottom are we've got to lose some staff if we're going to live within our means. We're going to have to gain some staff. The really scary line is actually a very small one there, but it's the registered nurse line. So it's a red line right across the bottom, and you can see just about all of our homes have got more registered nursing minutes to acquire between now and the 1st well, the 1st of July if they're 24/7 required nurses, or for the minutes. So with the registered nurse shortage, that's a huge challenge for us. So I wasn't expecting to go through all that detail, but I thought you might just get a sense of such a big reform. Of course, since the pricing for ANAC was set 12 months ago, 12 months ago, in April it was released, hasn't been indexed, our costs have gone crazy. If I just take one example, agency costs in the last 6 months of 2023, the calendar year, normally 6 months prior, $12 million. Can anybody guess? $39 million. So massive cost increases. And then, of course, we've got all of the burden of indexation and inflation that's hitting everyone with electricity, insurances, you name it. So we are still in the black overall. That first slide shows you earnings before interest, tax, depreciation per day. And you can see this long, steady decline. We're the top line, and then the Stuart Brown numbers are sort of the rest of the sector. So it's been a slow train coming, I guess, but you can see the rapid speeding up because of those escalating costs that's impacting the sector. And, you know, as Linnell Briggs actually called out, the lack of indexation is really been at the heart of this. So on the other graph there, you can see COPE, which is the bottom red line. All we've had since the Royal Commission finished and made urgent cries for top-up funding was 1.1% indexation in FY22. 1.1%. What was inflation? Well, actually, inflation's there on the blue line, so you can see where it's gone. And then just for this financial year we're in, we got 1.7% indexation, but only on the first quarter. ANAC has not been indexed. So the squeeze is very much on. And yeah, we've got potentially more squeeze coming towards us if the government doesn't fully fund the impact of the new award increases that the Fair Work Commission has just recently granted. So don't get me wrong, we absolutely believe that frontline aged care workers need additional funding, and we are committed to making sure that every single dollar we receive for that funding is used for employment costs. There's been some rumours going around that some providers are planning to use it for budget repair. No, our workers do need an uplift. Our workers don't need the full 15% because we have always paid above the award. We've been trying to increase wages for our aged care staff as far as we could afford to do for many years. But nonetheless, there is still some significant repair and recognition of the incredible work that they do for seniors. So this incredibly welcome commitment where the government has said that they will fully fund what the Fair Work Commission provides is absolutely wonderful. By the middle of the year, there'll be over $1 billion in the pockets of aged care workers, and that is just the most wonderful thing that has been a long time coming. Because I think how we've come to be here is, as we as large employers have been squeezed by a lack of indexation, we've passed that on to our workers through sorry, we can't afford to pay you. We can't afford to pay you more than 1 or 2%, while the rest of the market, like Bunnings, was probably doing the 3s and the 4s for many years. So, we do have a way to make up. So we are, very much interested in making conditions better. But of course, there's a lot of risk there. We have $93 million worth of accrued liabilities on our balance sheet just for our aged care workers today. So on the 30th of June, that balance sheet has to be revalued by, I'd say, at least $10 million. We're still waiting to get the details. So it's critically important that as it's worked out by the department, by the government, how they're going to fund the 15% uplift, it's really important that they do it very carefully and hopefully in collaboration with the sector. So what does this long-run underfunding sort of mean? Well, for Uniting, it sort of goes exactly to Chris's point. It's been a capital freeze. When I first arrived here in 2018, we were rebuilding our homes, this beautiful legacy of homes that we'd got from 40 years old plus. This is our home in Gerringong. This week I was in Wantama in Orange, a home that was rebuilt 6 years ago. It's got the household model. And I tell you what, I think I saw aged care as we could all hope it should be. The lounge room in every household was decorated in accordance with what those residents want. They all had their own bedroom and an ensuite. There was beautiful light and sunshine. That's how aged care can actually be. But sadly, you can see from this graph, so this is what we have spent on residential aged care capital. On this graph, it's gone off a cliff. We have got a capital freeze happening because we couldn't afford to keep rebuilding our older homes. And so what it looks like is this next photo shows you that in 2019, I went out to Emu Plains and I did my first sod turn for a residential aged care home since I'd been the CEO, and it was my last. That beautiful home is now completed. It opened last year. It's a lovely place for seniors to be cared for and have the best life that they can choose. But sadly, I don't have another sod turning booked. So we've got to find a way to turn this capital pipeline back on. In fact, not only are we not building them, we have indeed closed them. And I'm not sure about you, but I feel like there are closures happening around us quietly. Responsible providers make sure that their residents and their staff have somewhere to go, and then they quietly close. And if they're not closing, they are taking out these awful 4-bedded rooms and turning them into doubles, at least to try and provide some level of dignity and respect to our seniors. So ultimately, I think the sector is contracting. I would be stunned if the FY23 reports don't show that we have contracted. And I think the hospital system would be enormously concerned. Here in New South Wales, there's already a couple of local health districts reaching out with the bed blockage issues that they have, desperately asking us to find new capacity to help unlock that. So have we been, and sorry, this is another implication. Thank you for taking me forward. The next implication is that we had started to lean into the need for regional services to find a new home. Consolidation, it needs to happen. And we've actually taken on 7 homes in the last sort of 2 years or so, and we've paused. We don't feel that we can actually keep taking on more and more regional homes at this point in time with the state that we're in and the stretch that it creates. We've got a lot of people to look after at Uniting. We don't want to compromise people in our care by trying to overreach and do too much, so we have paused. So that's rather sad, I think. So the question is, I guess, have we been crying wolf as a sector for the last 5 years in saying there's not enough money here? I don't think we have. I think we've been pointing out that we're on a path to unsustainability, and it's really important that we address that path now. Because as Chris said, it's going to take 5 to 7 years to get the pipeline back on again across the sector. The funding gap now, however, is so large, these numbers just really surprise me, that I don't think there's any government that can afford to correct where we've gotten to over 2 decades or more of funding inadequacy. $330 a day, that's our average revenue now that we've got the ANAC funding built into Uniting. $330 a day. The ATO lets you claim more than that if you just want to have a night in Sydney as a business expense at $330. If you were in a medical ward in a hospital, it would be more than $800. That's the world I came from, and I was shocked to see the level of revenue into aged care. This is the one that really blows my mind. I couldn't put the $920 up there because a $28 number in lights, but the highest level of 24/7 care in a disability-supported independent living home is $928. Plus 75% of the pension to help pay for their daily living. It's interesting that in RAC it's 85% and $300 a day or less from the government. It feels like it's ageism at work, and it certainly is social and financial policies at the wrong place. So we know that aged care is already a really significant cost to the government. It's budgeted to cost $27 billion this year, rising to almost $35 in a couple of years' time. But no one's actually done the work, the economic modelling, figured out how are we going to find a sustainable funding source to have the aged care system we want. The work that's coming with the Independent Hospital Pricing Authority is really, really important. But it's really urgent as well. And unfortunately, what they're doing at the moment is they're costing the care we deliver today, which is the rationed care. They're not costing what it will take to actually deliver the vision of the Royal Commission, the new standards. But anyway, it's a really good start. But I guess for what I can see right now is that providers are really wedged. We are wedged between prescribed inputs right down to the skill mix and the minutes and standards prescribed. This is what you must do. And then the vast majority of our funding is here, it's capped, and it's not adequate. So we are really, really wedged, and it's urgent that we find a sustainable solution to that. And the department might think that we've got administrative savings to make, or that perhaps we can put our prices up as long as, somebody approves it if it's above $550,000, but I don't think that's going to get us there. We are wedged. We are being wedged into a choice between being non-compliant or potentially taking ourselves towards insolvency. So it's not a place that we can stay. But please don't call me a whinging provider, right? People who know me know that I really like to find solutions. So I'll do my best to quickly point those out. I really think that Australia can have the aged care system that it deserves. And in seeking to make the world a better place, we've been doing a lot of what Simon's articulated there. I've got some photos here. We've been building integrated seniors communities. In fact, our one at Westmead's got its very own version of aged care for 4-year-olds. People old home for 4-year-olds, that one. We've got an early learning centre embedded in there as well. We've got assisted living coming in, and we are converting our retirement villages to rentals, so the older ones to rentals. So we are offering in different solutions. But I think no matter what, we're always going to need residential aged care. So we're going to need more of it. Even if we can drop the length of stay, as Chris has suggested, we will need more as our community ages. So it's really important that we find a way to fund that. Taxpayers currently fund 75% of ageing, and their share of the bill has been going up and up. And I think it's time really to grab Plan B, however you call it, to really pursue those consumer contributions. In his 2020 study, Michael Callaghan found that in superannuation, to make it work, people actually have to spend it. You can't just leave it sitting there. And he found that most people are actually passing away with their superannuation balances, their wealth intact. So that can't work. We have to actually unlock that. Superannuation was invented to give people dignity in retirement. And that doesn't mean only people who are not in residential aged care. So we need to actually untap some of that wealth for people of means to help unlock this. And there's some ideas that have been flowing around. Here's just 4 on the screen. I think Grant will take us through those. But, having settings like the means test based on $186,000 value for your house, that is such a crazy number these days. It's just hard to imagine where you'd find a house or anything for that price. Increasing the lifetime caps. So people of means, we're not talking about taking hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking about, tens and 20s and $30, just a $50 a day additional charge towards something like basic daily fee, $20,000 a year by the recipient. That would create $2 billion of additional revenue into the pot. So we could do better aged care for everyone. So these levers really have very significant payoffs, and we really have to start the debate to get them going. While I've got the stage, I will also make a beg for looking at the reforms as they go. And I'm delighted that the Inspector General's office is going to be looking at the impact of them, because there are unforeseen consequences coming to light. In a worldwide shortage of nurses, not recognising the skills of enrolled nurses, it doesn't help. Actually pursuing clinical outcomes to the degree that we turn our aged care homes back into hospital-like wards and lose the fact that they're a place where people live and want to have the life they choose, it could be an unintended consequence of how the reforms are being implemented. So stopping and pausing and saying, is this what we thought would happen? Is this the very best use of every dollar that we've got? Is what we're really looking for as the next step. And I think on that note, I really have to stop. Sorry, Chris, you haven't dragged me off. But I think in closing, the scene is set. The Albanese government has committed to fixing aged care. The community cares about aged care, having seen what we've been through with COVID. We are the leaders of this time. So let's lead in and have these conversations and shift the dial so that it is, we are able to save the gap, close that gap, and seniors get the care and the life that they deserve. Thank you.